On glancing over my notes of the 70-odd cases in which I have during the last 8 years studied the methods of my friend Sherlock Holmes, I find many tragic, some comic, a large number merely strange, but none commonplace, for, working as he did rather for the love of his art than for the acquirement of wealth, he refused to associate himself with any investigation which did not tend towards the unusual, and even the fantastic. Of all these varied cases, however, I cannot recall any which presented more singular features than that which was associated with the well-known Surrey family of the Roylotts of Stoke Moran. The events in question occurred in the early days of my association with Holmes, when we were sharing rooms as bachelors in Baker Street. It is possible that I might have placed them upon record before, but a promise of secrecy was made at the time, from which I have only been freed during the last month by the untimely death of the lady to whom the pledge was given. It is perhaps as well that the facts should now come to light, for I have reasons to know that there are widespread rumors as to the death of Dr. Grimsby Roylott which tend to make the matter even more terrible than the truth. It was early in April in the year '83 that I woke one morning to find Sherlock Holmes standing, fully dressed, by the side of my bed. He was a late riser, as a rule, and as the clock on the mantelpiece showed me that it was only 7:15, I blinked up at him in some surprise, and perhaps just a little resentment, for I was myself regular in my habits. "Very sorry to knock you up, Watson," said he, "but it's the common lot this morning." "Mrs. Hudson has been knocked up," she retorted upon me, "and I on you." "What is it, then, a fire?" "No, a client. It seems that a young lady has arrived in a considerable state of excitement, who insists upon seeing me. She is waiting now in the sitting-room. Now, when young ladies wander about the metropolis at this hour of the morning, and knock sleepy people up out of their beds, I presume that it is something very pressing which they have to communicate. Should it prove to be an interesting case, you would, I am sure, wish to follow it from the outset. I thought, at any rate, that I should call you and give you the chance. My dear fellow, I would not miss it for anything. I had no keener pleasure than in following Holmes in his professional investigations, and in admiring the rapid deductions, as swift as intuitions, and yet always founded on a logical basis with which he unraveled the problems which were submitted to him. I rapidly threw on my clothes and was ready in a few minutes to accompany my friend down to the sitting-room. A lady dressed in black and heavily veiled, who had been sitting in the window, rose as we entered. "Good morning, madam," said Holmes cheerily. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. This is my intimate friend and associate, Dr. Watson, before whom you can speak as freely as before myself." "Ha! I am glad to see that Mrs. Hudson has had the good sense to light the fire. Pray draw up to it, and I shall order you a cup of hot coffee, for I observe that you are shivering." "It is not cold which makes me shiver," said the woman in a low voice, changing her seat as requested. "What, then?" "It is fear, mister." Holmes leaned forward and looked at the woman intently. "Fear? What is it that you are afraid of?" "It is my stepfather, Dr. Grimsby Roylott," she said. "He has a violent temper and has threatened me on several occasions. I am afraid that he means to harm me." "I see," said Holmes, nodding his head thoughtfully. "And what brings you to me this morning?" "It is a matter of great urgency," the woman said, pulling back her veil to reveal a face that was pale and drawn. "I have reason to believe that my stepfather is planning to harm me tonight. He has been acting strangely, and I fear that he has some terrible plan in mind. I need your help, Mr. Holmes. I don't know what to do." Holmes listened carefully as the woman told her story. It seemed that Dr. Roylott was a man of considerable wealth, who lived with his stepdaughter, Helen Stoner, in a large country house in Surrey. Helen's mother had died when she was young, and she had been raised by her stepfather, who had always been a difficult and domineering man. Lately, however, his behavior had become even more erratic, and Helen was convinced that he was planning to harm her in some way. Holmes asked a few questions, and it soon became clear that there was something very odd about the case. Helen had been hearing strange noises in the night, and had seen a strange band of light moving around her room. She had also discovered that the door to her room had been locked from the outside, and that her stepfather had kept a dangerous snake in a locked room nearby. It was all very mysterious, and Holmes was intrigued. "I will take your case, Miss Stoner," he said, rising from his chair. "You can rest assured that I will do everything in my power to protect you. Now, I suggest that you return home and keep a careful eye on your stepfather. Don't let him out of your sight, and don't take any unnecessary risks. I will visit you at your home this afternoon, and we can discuss the matter further." Helen Stoner thanked Holmes gratefully and left the room, accompanied by Dr. Watson. As they walked out into the street, Watson turned to his friend. "Well, Holmes, what do you make of it?" "It's a very curious case, Watson. I can't say that I've ever come across anything quite like it before. There's something very sinister going on at that house, and I intend to find out what it is." And with that, the two men set off for Stoke Moran, determined to unravel the mystery of the Speckled Band. As Holmes and Watson approached Stoke Moran, they observed the imposing house in which Dr. Grimsby Roylott and Helen Stoner resided. The house was situated in a desolate part of the countryside and seemed to be in a state of neglect. Holmes noticed the barred windows and the dilapidated state of the exterior, which indicated that the house had not been well maintained. Upon entering the house, Holmes examined the premises carefully. He paid particular attention to the room in which Helen Stoner slept and the adjoining room where the snake was kept. He noticed that there was a rope hanging from the ceiling, which appeared to be attached to a bell pull. As the day wore on, Holmes began to formulate a plan to catch Dr. Roylott in the act of harming his stepdaughter. He suggested that Helen Stoner sleep in a different room that night, so as not to raise her stepfather's suspicions. Holmes and Watson would keep watch over the house, and if anything suspicious occurred, they would ring the bell, summoning the local police. As they waited, Holmes and Watson heard the sound of a whistle outside the house. It was then that Holmes sprang into action. He seized a poker from the fireplace and smashed the bell pull, rendering it inoperable. Moments later, Dr. Roylott burst into the room, brandishing a snake. He had intended to use the snake to kill Helen Stoner, but his plan had been foiled by Holmes. In the ensuing struggle, the snake bit Dr. Roylott, and he died shortly thereafter. Holmes and Watson were able to rescue Helen Stoner and put an end to the reign of terror that had haunted her for so long. As they left Stoke Moran, Holmes turned to Watson and said, "Well, Watson, we have solved another case. The Speckled Band has been laid to rest, and justice has been served." And with that, the two men rode off into the night, leaving behind them the mystery of the Speckled Band, a case that would be remembered for years to come. The end. It's my pleasure to share one of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's famous Sherlock Holmes stories with you. Please like, share and subscribe for more. Please also leave your comments and we love to hear from you. Thank you.